On September 25, 1971, Paris turned into the stage for the biggest bodybuilding show on the planet. For the very first time, Mr. Olympia wasn't happening in New York, but crossed the Atlantic to take over the legendary Maison de la Mutualité Theater. Just that change of scenery showed the IFBB was aiming higher, transforming the contest into a truly international event. This was a night set to make history and bring twists that would change the sport forever. The event was still in the hands of two key figures in bodybuilding's rise: Joe Weider, the mastermind behind the Olympia, and Serge Nubret, then vice president of the IFBB. Nubret wasn't just a big name in the sport, he was also French, which made bringing the competition to his home country even more symbolic. Together, they helped cement the Olympia as something bigger than just a contest. It was becoming a global spectacle. What made this edition even more special was that it merged with the IFBB Mr. Universe, held that same night. The French stage welcomed 54 athletes from 37 countries, practically a United Nations of muscle. For many fans, it was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to see in person the stars they'd only read about in glossy magazines, now flexing live with their sculpted physiques. But the real hype was all about one showdown: Arnold Schwarzenegger versus Sergio Oliva. Back in 1969, Sergio had beaten the Austrian and looked unbeatable. Then, in 1970, Arnold struck back and took the crown. That meant Olympia 1971 was set up as the tiebreaker, the clash of titans to decide who was truly the greatest bodybuilder alive. Fans were buzzing like never before. Magazines, newsletters, even good old word of mouth built up a suffocating sense of anticipation. Everyone wanted the answer. Would Sergio, the myth Oliva, reclaim his throne, or would young Austrian phenom Arnold Schwarzenegger lock in his reign once and for all? The promise of a head-to-head battle was enough to pack the theater to the last seat. It's worth remembering that, at the time, the IFBB had bigger ambitions than just putting on shows. They wanted Olympic recognition. Ben and Joe Weider were pushing hard to get bodybuilding seen not as a hobby or just aesthetics, but as a legitimate sport. That 1971 Olympia was a major move in their campaign, meant to showcase bodybuilding's organization, strength, and seriousness to the world. So, when the lights went up on September 25th, expectations were sky-high. This wasn't just another Olympia. It was a turning point, an event designed to catapult bodybuilding onto the global stage. The crowd felt they were about to witness something eternal, a battle of gods. But instead of an epic clash, 1971 would go down as one of the sport's biggest controversies. When the athletes arrived in Paris, few expected the real fight to happen backstage, not under the spotlights. That year, the IFBB rolled out a new rule that changed everything: the so-called exclusivity rule. From then on, any competitor who took part in rival federation shows, like NABA's Mr. Universe, would be automatically banned for a full year. It was a game-changer and still sparks heated debates among bodybuilding fans and historians. Ben Weider, IFBB president, gave an official explanation that sounded noble: to align bodybuilding with Olympic committee standards. According to him, for the sport to have any shot at the Olympics, it needed clear divisions between amateurs and pros, plus stricter control over eligibility. On paper, it was a step toward raising bodybuilding to the level of established sports. But in practice, many saw it differently. By banning athletes from competing in rival federations, critics argued the Weider brothers were playing politics. The goal wasn't just to strengthen the IFBB, it was also to weaken NABA, which at the time still had huge prestige thanks to its history with the classic Mr. Universe. Both fans and athletes were split. Some believed the move could pave the way for bodybuilding to finally be taken seriously worldwide. Others saw it as a power grab, an authoritarian move that restricted athletes' freedom and created a near monopoly over the sport. Was it fair to punish someone just for stepping on a different stage? That was the burning question, and the effects were immediate. The rule was enforced hard in Paris, and several of the sport's biggest stars were barred from competing. What was supposed to be an epic Arnold-Sergio duel ended up collapsing. Instead of fireworks, the crowd got a one-sided show. Thousands of fans who had traveled for a clash of legends left with frustration, and 1971 went down as the Olympia that promised everything but delivered controversy. Interestingly enough, even after all the backlash, the exclusivity rule never really disappeared. It's been tweaked and reshaped over time, but the core idea that the IFBB demands loyalty from its athletes still exists in one form or another today. That shows just how much of a turning point 1971 really was, not only because of its immediate controversies, but also because of the lasting legacy of those decisions. And here's the big question. Was that rule truly necessary for the sport to grow, or was it just a power move to cement the Wheater's dominance? Opinions differ, but one thing is certain, it left deep scars. The 1971 Olympia became the perfect symbol of that dilemma. The fine line between professionalization and politics, between the Olympic dream and market control. In the end, the 1971 Olympia didn't go down in history for what happened on stage, but for what didn't. Fans had expected to see the world's top bodybuilders clash head-to-head, but the IFBB's brand new exclusivity rule flipped everything upside down. One by one, Arnold Schwarzenegger's main rivals were sidelined, turning what should have been a legendary showdown into a lonely walkover. The most shocking case was Sergio Oliva, the myth. A three-time Olympia champ, Sergio was considered the only man capable of slowing Arnold's meteoric rise. But just a week earlier, he decided to compete at NABBA's Mr. Universe in London, where he actually lost to Bill Pearl. That decision cost him dearly. When he showed up in Paris, he was told he was suspended by the IFBB, meaning he couldn't defend his Olympia crown. Another major name shut out was Franco Columbu, Arnold's best friend and one of the most promising physiques of the era. Franco had already won titles like Mr. Universe and Mr. World, but his appearance at unsanctioned events, like the 1970 AU Pro Mr. World, got him excluded. For the fans, it was a huge loss, since the friendly rivalry between Arnold and Franco could have added even more electricity to the night. Roy Callender, another standout with a jaw-dropping build, also fell into the same trap. Like Oliva, he'd stepped on stage at NABBA's 1971 Mr. Universe, which automatically ruled him out in Paris. Yet another big name who could have raised the level of competition, reduced to a spectator in what was supposed to be his moment. And it didn't stop there. Two other respected competitors, Ken Waller and Frank Zane, chose not to even make the trip to Paris. Both saw the storm brewing and decided not to gamble with the new rule. Zane's absence, in particular, was felt deeply. His refined aesthetics and flawless proportions could have brought a striking contrast to the mass monster showdown of Arnold versus Sergio. The result? A gutted Olympia. The fans, who had packed the theater expecting a night of titans, ended up watching a stage that was practically empty, leaving only Arnold Schwarzenegger as the official competitor. Of course, Arnold won, but without direct rivals. His victory felt less like an athletic conquest and more like the product of political maneuvering. The episode left fans and athletes frustrated, even angry. Many wondered, what would that Olympia have looked like if all the legends had been there? Could Arnold have really held off Sergio in top form? Might Franco Columbu have pulled an upset? These are the what-ifs that can never be answered, but they still fuel debates to this day. Still, no matter the politics, the show had to go on. And when the lights came up for the main event, the audience was met with a surreal sight. Arnold Schwarzenegger, standing alone on stage. With no rivals to challenge him, the Austrian giant simply showcased his commanding physique and claimed his second straight Mr. Olympia title. The prize was a modest $1,000, about $7,500 in today's money, but the real reward was far greater. Arnold's image was now locked in as the new face of bodybuilding worldwide. Arnold stepped on stage weighing around 114 kilos, about 246 pounds, heavier and fuller than the year before. Even though he was a little less defined, his silhouette was jaw-dropping, massive arms, a full chest, and that magnetic stage presence. He seemed to know this wasn't going to be a showdown, but rather his personal showcase, and he used every second to mesmerize the crowd. One detail that added even more flair to the night was the soundtrack. A live orchestra played during the routines, giving the whole thing an almost theatrical vibe. The 1971 Olympia wasn't just about muscles, it was a cultural spectacle. For the fans packed inside the Maison de la Mutualite, that night became unforgettable, not because of the competition, but because of the artistic experience they witnessed. And even though there weren't points or trophies on the line, the guest posings brought real sparkle to the stage. First up was Franco Columbu, Arnold's best friend, who showed off a compact, dense, and razor-sharp physique. Short in stature, but huge in proportions, Franco made it clear he was going to be a major force in the future of the sport. Then came Sergio Oliva. Still officially suspended, he appeared only as a guest, but the crowd erupted when he walked out. With his tiny waist and colossal arms, the myth reminded everyone why he was considered one of the greatest of all time. Even without the same definition he had in past years, his physique still looked like a living sculpture, and the audience went wild with every pose. Another curious moment came when Ahmed Ayoub, an Arab bodybuilder, was brought on stage by Serge Nubret for some comparisons. He didn't officially compete, but his presence added a touch of diversity and highlighted how the IFBB was already trying to attract athletes from all corners of the globe, reinforcing the competition's international identity. So, the 1971 Olympia turned into something unusual, a contest without a contest, but not without entertainment. Arnold shined alone, yes, but the guest routines from Franco, Sergio, and even Ayoub made sure the fans left with unforgettable memories. It was a night of triumph for the Austrian, but also a reminder that, even in the middle of politics and strict rules, bodybuilding never lost its essence: to amaze, inspire, and move people. If the Olympia left fans with a bitter taste due to the lack of real competition, the same can't be said about the 1971 IFBB Mr. Universe, held that very night. That was the event that saved the evening, giving the crowd what they came for: direct clashes between top bodybuilders from around the world, sweat, drama, and surprises under the spotlight. Without it, the night might have been remembered only for Arnold's lonely win. The highlight came with Albert Beckles, who won the overall title after a surprising twist. At first, the victory had been announced for Turkey's Ahmet Inanlu, but a judging error forced a correction. In a rare and admirable act of sportsmanship, Inanlu accepted the decision gracefully and stood on the podium in second place, acknowledging that Beckles truly had the best physique that night. It was a moment of respect and honor that touched everyone in the audience. Fans also got a taste of future icons. Among them were Mike Katz, impressive with his size and charisma; Ed Corney, who drew applause with his symmetry and hypnotic posing style; Vic Downs, boasting a massive and balanced physique; and Giuseppe Diena, who stood out despite his shorter stature. Many of these names would soon become legends, making that universe a true showcase of talent. The battles were intense across every division. Each athlete brought something unique, whether it was raw muscle density, refined aesthetics, or commanding stage presence. For the audience, it was the chance to witness the birth of legends who would soon carve their names into bodybuilding history. This wasn't just a side contest. It was a central piece of that unforgettable night in Paris. The contrast between the Universe and the Olympia couldn't have been sharper. While Arnold's title came without opposition, the Mr. Universe delivered real battles and edge-of-your-seat drama. The difference was so striking that many fans left talking more about the Universe than about the Olympia itself, something rare, but a true sign of how important that competition was in 1971. Beyond the onstage excitement, the Universe also reinforced the IFBB's vision of making bodybuilding truly international. Athletes from 37 countries competed that year, proving that bodybuilding was no longer just an American pastime, but a global movement on the rise. That international flavor gave more legitimacy to the Weider's dream of one day seeing the sport recognized as Olympic. In the end, the 1971 IFBB Mr. Universe became the perfect balance for what was otherwise a turbulent night. It delivered the show fans were expecting, introduced future legends, and gave back the sense of competition that the Olympia lacked. Thanks to it, that night in Paris is remembered not only for controversy, but also as a historic event. The fallout from Olympia 1971 was immediate and intense. Many fans felt cheated, convinced the Weiders had robbed them of the long-awaited clash of gods: Arnold Schwarzenegger versus Sergio Oliva. The sold-out Paris crowd wanted to see the Austrian up-and-comer face off against the Cuban myth, but instead, they witnessed a lonely victory, decided more by backstage politics than by what happened under the lights. That frustration was so strong that to this day, Olympia 1971 is remembered as the infamous no contest. Instead of being celebrated for muscle and poses, it went down in history as the year when rules and power play spoke louder. It's a contest studied and debated not for its technical level, but for its absence of real competition. A reminder that bodybuilding has always been shaped by politics as much as by physiques. For Arnold, though, that empty stage turned into a golden opportunity. With no rivals to share the spotlight, he shined alone and cemented himself as the face of the IFBB. He didn't just bring size, he brought charisma and presence, the perfect ambassador for the sport. From that moment, nobody doubted he was destined to be the biggest name of his generation. Meanwhile, Sergio Oliva remained a fan favorite. Even suspended, his guest posing was so powerful that many left the theater convinced that, in top form, he could have beaten Arnold. With his tiny waist, massive arms, and almost mythical aura, Sergio still had crowds in the palm of his hand. For many fans, that Olympia didn't settle anything. It only fueled the question, who was truly the best? That Arnold-Sergio contrast made the 1971 edition even more legendary. The audience felt like they had seen an unfinished show, but also the birth of a rivalry that would fuel the sport for years to come. In a way, the lack of real competition only built more anticipation for future battles, keeping the Olympia at the center of attention. The episode also revealed something important. Even in its youth, the Olympia was already deeply tied to power struggles and sports politics. And ironically, it was exactly that controversy that helped it become a worldwide reference. By concentrating attention, the Olympia solidified its spot as bodybuilding's ultimate title, overshadowing rival contests like NABBA's Mr. Universe. The legacy of 1,971 cuts both ways, frustration and distrust on one side, but the definitive consolidation of the Olympia on the other. Decades later, questions still linger. The biggest one, would Arnold have still won if Sergio Oliva and Franco Columbu had been on stage? Many argue yes, pointing to Arnold's massive form that year, bigger and still climbing. Others insist that Sergio in top shape was practically unbeatable. The truth? We'll never know, and that mystery is exactly what keeps 1971 alive in bodybuilding lore. Another unavoidable question is about the IFBB's decision itself. Was the exclusivity rule really a legitimate move to professionalize bodybuilding and align it with the Olympic dream? Or was it just a political play by the Weider brothers to weaken rivals and guarantee Olympia's supremacy? Depending on who you ask, it was either a necessary step for growth or a backroom deal that sacrificed the very essence of competition. What's undeniable is this. Over time, the 1971 Olympia has been remembered not for Arnold's win, but for what didn't happen. Fans never got the promised duel, never saw the clash of titans that could have defined an era. Instead, the night became a kind of unfinished legend, an eternal what if, that still fascinates bodybuilding fans and historians. Funny enough, even with so few official competitors, that edition is one of the most talked about of all time. Maybe because it proves that bodybuilding is about more than muscle. It's about stories, rivalries, politics, and dreams, even the ones cut short. So, what did you think of revisiting this controversial Olympia? 1971 might not have delivered the battle fans wanted, but it gave us one of the most fascinating, debated stories in the sport's history. And that's what makes it unforgettable. A reminder that bodybuilding isn't just about victories on stage. It's also about the backstage, the rivalries, and the questions that never fade. If you made it this far, you already know, this is the moment to support the channel. Hit that like button, because it really helps us keep producing full, detailed videos about bodybuilding history. And if you want to go even deeper, consider becoming a channel member. You'll be supporting the work and also unlocking exclusive content and perks. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode of this series. Together, we're building the complete timeline of Mr. Olympia, and every subscription counts to strengthen this community of true bodybuilding fans. Now I want to hear from you. Who do you think would have won in 1971 if everyone had been on stage? Would Arnold have kept the crown, or would Sergio Oliva have taken back his throne? Drop your opinion in the comments. We read everything, and we love seeing the different takes from our community. And before you go, check out the final screen. We've got another video from this series waiting for you. Click it and keep going on this amazing journey through Olympia history. I promise, the details and surprises still to come will blow your mind. That's it, my friend. Like, comment, subscribe, and let's keep this ride going. Bodybuilding is built on legends, and together we're telling every chapter of this epic story. See you in the next one.